Every New Mexican deserves to understand how the law works for them, or why it doesn't work for them. Welcome to New Mexico Legal Lowdown, hosted by attorney Feliz Rael. Each episode, we will help demystify the legal system and uncover misconceptions through real conversations with New Mexico trial lawyers. Produced and powered by LawPods.
This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our La Justicia Circle supporters, Singleton Schreiber, Nick Rowley, Lori Benko, Sherry LaCour, and McGinn, Montoya Love, Curry, and Sievers, PA. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. And now, on to our conversation. Hi. Welcome to the New Mexico Legal Lowdown podcast. We are trial lawyers or plaintiff lawyers talking about the civil justice system in New Mexico. The laws in New Mexico may be different from the laws in other states. The purpose of the podcast is to provide general information to demystify the civil legal process in New Mexico. This is not a substitute for appropriate legal advice in any individual case. Please contact a lawyer if you want to talk about your particular case. Today, I am very happy to welcome Chris Papaleo of Atkins and Walker Law, PC. Chris, welcome.
Good morning, Felice. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be part of this podcast.
I'm so glad you agreed to do this. First of all, tell us about your law firm.
Thanks, Felice. I've got the great privilege of working with two other lawyers. So there's three of us in the firm, and we all are plaintiffs lawyers, and we all fight the good fight, and we represent people who've been harmed, and we take on the big corporations and the people in power who have been the cause of that harm. And so there's myself, Tyler Atkins, and Sam Walker. And we've got a couple of wonderful support staff here, and we specialize in medical malpractice, wrongful death, civil rights, premises liability, personal injury. And we do that kind of on different levels. We represent people who've been wronged, and we do our best to right that wrong by taking on whoever's responsible, whether that's a corporation, the state, the county, the federal government, another driver on the highway, whether that's an individual or a trucking company, a property owner or a management company who are not keeping premises safe for people. And we also take on insurance companies who are not honoring their obligations to their customers. So we represent victims of all kinds, victims of medical malpractice, victims of catastrophic personal injury, victims who've had their civil rights violated. The thrust of our practice is helping these victims right the wrong. And we do that through litigation. And in fact, last month, Tyler and I, along with our co-counsel, went to trial here in Albuquerque and got a great result for our client. But also it was a great result for the people in New Mexico, because in that particular case, which I think is a lot of us plaintiff lawyers, we represent an individual in a specific case. But our hope is, and our clients often want, to make sure this isn't going to happen to somebody else.
Yes.
And in our particular case, in this one, it was a nursing home neglect case, an interesting opportunity to have the application of the Unfair Practices Act, which is getting a little into the weeds, but this act just says businesses, you can't, the short version of describing this is you can't do something fraudulent or unsavory to get someone's business. You can't do that. And we got this juror of 12 New Mexicans said to this nursing home, you can't lie to people to get them to come be patients in your nursing home and then not deliver what you promised to them. And that was kind of exciting. And hopefully that the nursing home industry is going to pay attention to that there's a loud and clear message in New Mexico right now after our case, and that is nursing homes, you can't lie to the people to get them to become your resident and then treat them badly.
I'm so proud of you, because those cases I know can be expensive, and you never know what a jury is going to do. So I'm super happy that you guys had the courage to do that for your client, and that your client had you guys.
Thank you. And I just want to say, Tyler and our co-counsel, Christopher Templeman, did an amazing job telling that story. And that's what we do as trial lawyers. We're storytellers, and we're telling the story, sadly, of something that went wrong for somebody.
We wish they wouldn't have to hire lawyers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But
Oh,
they did a great job, and the jury did its duty and came back with a verdict in favor of our client.
that's so great. Chris, when did you first think that you wanted to be a lawyer and why?
This is a very lengthy time period. The answer to that question involves a very lengthy period of time. So just by way of background, and I know kind of we're doing this in honor of, or in conjunction with it being Pride Month. I came out as a gay man in college in the early 90s. It was a little different back then.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to have family and friends who supported me up and lifted me through that. And one of the places I landed was I went to work while I was in college at a law firm for a gay lawyer who did employment law representing queer folks who had been discriminated against. And it was really my first kind of foray and introduction into the law and how it worked. And he had one particular case that's always just stuck with me. If you remember, this is back in the 90s, and HIV and AIDS were rampant in the queer community. It was a pandemic, and there was not enough attention being paid to helping people in this environment. There was not enough research money, there was not enough political will to make change. And this lawyer, I remember he represented this one guy who our client had AIDS, which is a medical diagnosis, has certain criteria. And at that time, people with AIDS were really susceptible to a particular type of infection that could be transmitted through water. And it wasn't filtered for at the time in most places. This particular client happened to work for a water company. And as part of that settlement, the company agreed to start transitioning to filter out this harmful element that could help people suffering from AIDS.
That's
And,
incredible. And
and
I'm
it was
sure there are other people, I mean, all kinds of people who are vulnerable for a variety of reasons.
it was just seeing that one person, a lawyer, I think sometimes as lawyers we forget lawyers have a lot of power they can yield by helping people access justice. And it was amazing to see one man with one lawyer take on this big corporation and affect this sweeping change. And I thought that's pretty cool. So with through that lens, I applied for law school back in the 90s and I got in. And then for various reasons, I said, that's not it wasn't the right time. But what I did do is I went to go work as a paralegal for a plaintiff's firm and did some malpractice, premises liability cases as a paralegal, and also discrimination cases. And then did that for several years. And then I moved to New Mexico in 2006. I moved back. So I grew up here. I went to undergraduate school in Southern California, which is where I got that job. When I moved back, I was lucky enough to get a work as a paralegal at a New Mexico plaintiffs firm here that does really great transformative work on behalf of injured New Mexicans, and got exposed to these cases where people were really making a change here, making everybody safer, making people more secure. And I really enjoyed that work, and I did that for a long time. And then in 2017, there was change in this country, and I said to myself, it's time to go back to law school because
I'm
I
so
need,
glad you did. I remember I met you back then, and you
yeah,
were an amazing paralegal, but I love you more as a lawyer.
thank you. And what I wanted to just point out about that is I felt at the time, and this kind of ties into my feeling about the great power that lawyers can do for good. Felt I needed to go to law school to get that extra set of tools and skills to help people, because I thought this change that was happening was going to start stripping away people's rights. And I thought, I need to be there. I need to have these tools so I can fight back to help people. And so I went to law school in 2017.
I'm so glad.
As
And
a as a
yes.
they call us non-traditional students. So I was in my mid-40s when I went to law school.
But you were no spring chicken when it came to legal stuff. I mean, you weren't starting from scratch, I don't think.
Not at all. And
Yeah.
certainly my background and my history working in the area helped me. But law school's hard, it's different. But I'm so glad I did it, and now get to be part of this great community in New Mexico of lawyers who do what we have to do to help people right the wrong. And it feels so good when we do it. That's what drives me, is that feeling when we have somebody, as plaintiffs lawyers, most of the time, we don't get to see people having a great day. Most times, we interact with our clients at probably the darkest point in their life. I have a wrongful death case of a teenager.
Oh,
His mom came to me. That's one of the darkest moments of her life. And so that means something. When somebody is coming to trust you to try and make their day different, a little better, their load a little lighter, their future a little brighter. That's what we do as finance lawyers. And when you do it well, and you do it right, there's no better feeling than when somebody says thank you. And they say thank you in a way that is so meaningful and kind of doesn't always necessarily have to be spoken, but it's understood when you look at them that their tomorrow's a little different than it was today, and hopefully better. We can never bring somebody back. We can never
yeah.
undo that injury, that physical injury, but we can make someone's tomorrow a little better, a little lighter, a little brighter, and that feels good.
And also, I've certainly, at least a couple times that I can think of off the top of my head, gone to trial and lost. And that can be devastating, but I think that there's value in taking that risk, and you just never know, and helping someone feel that you stood up for them, that you helped them tell their story. And, if 12 people decided that, they weren't entitled to what they were asking for, okay. I mean, that's just part of the nature of it. But I always worry when we put so much emphasis on winning, and sometimes, most cases end up in settlement, but sometimes we go to trial and we lose, and that I always end up back in therapy for, another 6 months every time that happens. But it's still meaningful.
It is, and I think you in that moment you touched upon I think what's truly at the essence of what we do as plaintiffs lawyers. We don't know if we're going to prevail or not, as you pointed out, but what we do is we listen to our clients, and that gives them agency,
Yeah,
and it
yeah,
validates that something happened to them. And I think right, we want to have that validation, we want to have that moment and prevail. But even if we don't prevail, we've done that for them. We've
yeah,
given them a voice, we've given them agency, we've believed them. We said, "Yeah, you're right, that was wrong.
yeah.
Let's see what we can do to fix it." And I can't tell you the number of people who said to me, "The fact that you guys just took the time to listen to me made
Right.
the difference." And so our representation does that. We give people agency, we listen to them, and hopefully we prevail, but we don't always, as you pointed out. But in the meantime, we've given them a voice.
Yeah, yeah. So, as you mentioned, we are recording this podcast, and one of the things that we want to honor is Pride Month. What does Pride Month mean to you?
Well, I have a few thoughts on that. Let's start with, Pride Month is in many parts my existence year round. I think it's
Yes.
wonderful. We all celebrate Pride as we should. There's a reason for Pride, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But also, I think it's important to remember for as LGBTQ plus people, we walk through the world every day with that. We exist in our families, in our relationships, in our work environments, at the grocery store, on an airplane, at a sporting event. We walk in the world in that role, and so I think it's great we have a month that's June. We'll talk about why it's June, but I think it's also important to remember it's a daily existence for many New Mexicans, and I personally think I'm happy to be a gay man in New Mexico because I think we have a bunch of protections here. I want to talk a little bit about that too. But so why is June Pride Month? I think a lot of people don't know the answer to that. So I thought I'd share that. Pride in the United States mostly
Stonewall, right?
comes from Stonewall, exactly.
Yeah.
And so if our viewers aren't aware or listeners aren't aware, the Stonewall Inn was a gay bar in New York City in Lower Manhattan. And although there had been efforts and protests about gay rights and honestly harassment from the police before what happened at Stonewall happened, but at the end of June, on June 28th, 1969, the police raided the Stonewall Inn. And this was consistent with a long series of harassment that had been taking place. And on that night, people said enough's enough. And the patrons and some neighbors fought back. And there actually were some people call it the Stonewall riots, some people refer to it the Stonewall uprising. But what happened was people who had been targeted and harassed by the police department for being queer said enough's enough, and they pushed back. And that is why June is our Pride Month, because that moment of exercising power, responding to power, fighting back against the power, it garnered momentum, and in that moment, there's a couple of great trans activists who were there that night that we all know about, and for those who don't, we need to know more about. But Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera were there that night, throwing stones back, fighting back, and that moment triggered a lot of inspiration for people to exercise power to claim back their rights. And that's why we have Pride in June.
I'm so glad. And, I think I mentioned we were having coffee recently, and I overheard a policymaker say that in this day and age, queer people have all their rights. Do you? I don't think I agree with that. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I think this is an important conversation because the truth is, there has been a lot of change.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of change since I came out in the mid 90s.
Yeah. And I want you to talk
Um,
about it. We'll talk about New Mexico specific laws and other stuff, but generally, I mean, do you think that there are enough protections? And do you think, how do I want to ask this? Do you think that those legal protections are uniformly enforced?
no, I don't.
Yeah.
No, there's not enough. There's more to be done. And
Okay.
no, I think our existing laws aren't enforced enough. And I think those two interplay together.
Yeah.
We need the protections because the discrimination, the violence is still happening.
It
It
is.
happens to
It
this
breaks
day.
my
And
heart.
we do have great tools in New Mexico, and we can go into greater depth about some of them. But also, this is, a conversation that people have to have with a lawyer. Just because we have laws doesn't mean everybody's going to follow them. And when people don't follow them, sometimes it's really difficult to do this on your own. I would venture to say with some of these claims, it's really not easy to do it alone. And so, yes, we have laws, but you need a lawyer to help you enforce them, and to
Yeah.
activate them. And there's some places where communities do it as well. But, for an individual, yes, we have some statutes, we have some laws, but you have to be able to find a lawyer to help
Yeah.
you to do that oftentimes. Um,
Let's talk about the laws in New Mexico. What kinds of laws exist to protect people?
well, before we do that, if we could,
Yeah.
because I think it ties into this. And in my mind, I've also heard people kind of like what your person was describing is why do we still need pride?
Oh,
You know, you guys, you guys, right? It's always a group of us. You have all these rights now. And so I wanted to actually read you something from a New Mexico Supreme Court case from 2013. So it's 13 years old. But this was the case. It's called Griego v. Oliver. And for those non-lawyers watching, it was the case where the New Mexico Supreme Court said that the Equal Protection Clause of the New Mexico Constitution guaranteed same-gender couples the right to marry. Now, this is a big deal for lots of reasons, but also just to point out that was 2 years before the United States Supreme Court made that same finding in Obergefell v. Hodges. So 2 years before that, New Mexico was ahead of the game. And our Supreme Court, in a unanimous opinion, and frankly, a very beautiful opinion written by Justice Chavez, there's a quotation I wanted to read to you. And the last sentence of this, to me, tells us why we still need pride. And so this is from Griego v. Oliver, quote, however, perhaps more importantly, New Mexico has recently enacted legislation to prohibit discrimination against individuals based upon their sexual orientation, enacted legislation to prohibit law enforcement officers from profiling individuals based on their sexual orientation, and added sexual orientation as a protected class under hate crimes legislation. And this is the sentence that I think reverberates. None of this legislation would have been required if the LGBTQ community was not a discrete group which has experienced a history of purposeful, unequal treatment and acts of violence. And so, why do we need pride? That's why.
yeah.
And it continues today. Violence against queer folks is still happening. 2 weeks
Yeah.
ago, Juniper Blessing, a trans woman from Santa Fe, was stabbed to death in her college housing in Seattle. Attacks against the rights of and safety of queer folks continue on the federal level. including other marginalized groups, but LGBTQ people and Black, Indigenous, and people of color are being removed from websites. We are being taken out of museums by the government, and there's a constant attack on efforts for diversity, equity, and inclusion in our society. And so, why do we need pride? We need pride because all that is still happening. And sometimes that can be upsetting, and it is upsetting and should be upsetting to many people. But I also take comfort that in New Mexico, I feel protected. And I am protected differently in New Mexico than in other states, and certainly under federal law.
And I
So there's
think
more
if
work to be done,
Pride
but
yeah, if Pride becomes just a month where, we do drag brunch because the laws are enforced and everybody's being respectful, that would be okay with me.
yeah, yes.
But I don't think we're there yet.
We're not quite there yet. For anybody watching, there are lots of fun drag brunch opportunities. Check online, go out, have a good time, because we do not have in New Mexico a culture where that says people can't do that.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting as we dive into kind of some of the laws in New Mexico, I think, I don't know if you would agree, and maybe others wouldn't, but in my time in New Mexico, I've found that generally speaking, New Mexicans respect our neighbors, and we let our neighbors be whoever our neighbors are going to be.
Sure.
We leave them to be themselves, and that kind of respect to be different almost, I think
Yeah.
is really important. And I think it also helps me understand, we're going to start talking about the New Mexico Human Rights Act as the law that we have in New Mexico that protects LGBTQ people. In 2003, New Mexico added sexual orientation and gender identity to the Human Rights Act. Now, it had been passed in 1969, and there were changes along the way. Different classes of people were added, but in 2003, New Mexico added sexual orientation and gender identity. We were the third state in the country to do that.
That makes me so proud.
Right? It does.
Yeah.
And I think that emphasizes that here in New Mexico, we respect people to be who they are. 2003, we were the third state to do that. As of today, I think there are 21 states and the District of Columbia who added sexual orientation and or gender identity to their Human Rights Act equivalent. So even in this day, 2026,
Wow.
that's only 22 places,
That's shocking.
right? And so
Yeah.
when we ask why pride, this factors into that conversation as well. So what does the New Mexico Human Rights Act do? It makes illegal discrimination based on several classes or categories, including sexual orientation or gender identity in employment, in housing, in businesses. The law uses a fancy word called public accommodation, which just means businesses, and now also means the state, public bodies, the state, the county, cities are now included. As of 2023, it was amended to include public bodies. So the act now prohibits discrimination. Oh, excuse me. And last, in 2025, our Supreme Court also expanded it to include public schools. So our Human Rights Act started in 1969, changed over time, was on the forefront of LGBTQ rights in 2003, now protects queer folks in work, in business, in restaurants, sports venues, with the state, with the city, with the county, and in public schools from discrimination. It also prevents or makes illegal discrimination in banking and electronic, so loans, credit applications can't discriminate. And it also has been included to prohibit profiling by law enforcement based on sexual orientation and or gender identity. So this little law that started in 1969 was expanded in 2003 is a very powerful tool. And I think one of the other things when we're talking about the law and accessing them that's important to remember is sometimes you need a lawyer, and lawyers
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
help.
So, and my understanding is that for the Civil Rights Act, in order for it to be enforced, and you tell me, but first there's like a claim that gets made to the commission, and then depending on what or maybe regardless of what that commission says, you still have a right to access the court. But is that the first step?
Yeah, it's the Human Rights Act. There's that administrative element, those steps you have to go through before you get to a lawsuit. and then you can still file a lawsuit. And
And what is the benefit of going through that administrative process?
well,
I
it's a
mean,
requirement,
okay.
so you have
And
to, as a threshold matter.
depending on the outcome of that, does that end up benefiting the lawsuit?
Well, I think, well, certainly if perhaps if the administrative process goes your way
Yeah.
and the bad actor says, okay, I hear you loud and clear, I'll change my ways. I think that's not likely. But if it does happen, that's great. But you still have the right to bring your lawsuit and have a jury of your peers say, no, you don't get to treat this person this way. And I think one of the things that's also important to know about the Human Rights Act, it has an attorney fee provision in it as well. And why that matters. So let's talk about what attorney fee provision is and why that matters. First,
Mhm.
attorney fee provision is a part of a statute that says if you prevail, because your claim may not be the biggest monetarily, and it may not be the kind of case that would make it financially feasible for a lawyer to help you on its own. How do we want to encourage those cases to be brought? The legislature adds an attorney fee provision. And what that fee provision does, it says if you win, even though your case is small, we want lawyers to bring these cases to help you hold wrongdoers accountable. And so if you do that and you prevail, you can get your attorney's fees added as part of the outcome of the case. And,
And that
and attorney fee
ensures
provisions are
that,
important.
yeah, it ensures that not just rich people can access the legal system.
Exactly. It helps make it, and not just rich people, but also, small claims, whether the claim is worth $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, $1 million. There's a lot of work that goes into every claim. And so these attorney fee provisions say even if your wrong wasn't the worst financially, you were still wronged. You deserve a day in court, and we're going to find a way to help you find a lawyer to help you hold them accountable. That's a really important tool.
Yeah, yeah. We want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Adobe Pillar supporters, Fadul, Clough, Hardy, and Conaway, LLC, Poulos and Coates, and Tani, Acosta, and Chaparro, PC. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury. Now, back to our conversation. Okay, what are some other laws?
So we've got the Human Rights Act, again, a great law that is pretty expansive. That same year that sexual orientation and gender identity were added to the Human Rights Act, we passed a Hate Crimes Act that same year, 2003. And what that does, so people understand, it allows for an enhanced sentence, an enhanced penalty for crimes that are motivated by bias. And so there's lots of different biases that are included, and sexual orientation, actual or perceived, and that's important, and the same with gender identity, are part of that 2003 Hate Crimes Act. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Actual or perceived. Sometimes someone might think you're trans, might think you're gay, might think you're lesbian, and act based on that perception, whether or not you are. So this act's important, whether it's your actual or perceived sexual orientation or gender identity. In 2017, New Mexico got out in front again and banned conversion therapy. For those that don't know, conversion therapy it was banned for anybody under 18. So in New Mexico, it is illegal to send a minor to a licensed professional, healthcare, mental health, or healthcare provider to try and make them not gay or not
That's
trans.
so harmful.
It's so harmful, and there's so much literature about the harm that this causes. And yet, we had a recent Supreme Court decision from the United States Supreme Court saying that it's okay to have this therapy in existence, but not in New Mexico. So, going back to that why New Mexico offers more protections. In New Mexico, that is still banned under a 2017 ban. In 2021, New Mexico banned what's known as the panic defense. That is a completely illegitimate, no basis in reality defense where people who've committed a violent act try and say, well, wait, I was motivated. I panicked because they were gay or they were trans or she flirted with me, and that triggered my violent response. No go. Not in New Mexico. You don't get to do that. If you take a violent act, commit a crime, you don't get to say, I did it because they were gay and it provoked me.
Closed an
Um,
important loophole.
and it's a big and I say when I started this with it's an illegitimate defense. It's illegitimate, but people try it. And
Wow.
to give you another example of why New Mexico's in the fore on this, as of today, I did some more research. Only 20 states and the District of and DC have banned this defense.
Wow. Fortunately, when I think about the judges on the bench in New Mexico, I can't imagine, even if there was not a ban, an automatic ban, I can't imagine that many of our judges would tolerate that because it just sounds absurd to me on its face. But I'm glad that we've articulated that as a matter of public policy.
We have, and to your point, I think you're right. I think our judiciary would say no. But not only do we want to hope that they say no, this now gives them a tool to just flatly reject this terrible, terrible, illegitimate defense. And so that's another good reason why New Mexico protects folks. So keep going. In 2023, so just a few years ago, New Mexico passed and enacted the Reproductive and Gender Affirming Healthcare Freedom Act. And again, all around us in this country, there are some bad stuff taking place in the states around us, areas around us, the country around us. Not New Mexico. We have now said affirmatively, women and pregnant people, you get access to reproductive health care. Full stop. Nobody's taking that from you. If you are queer and trans or questioning, you can get gender affirming health care. Full stop. No one's going to take that from you. And that's important. These laws, when we're talking about when I look at as protecting, creating safety, giving me rights, it's also giving me agency as a
Yeah.
person. And this law is saying you, as someone seeking reproductive health care or gender affirming health care, you matter.
Yeah.
Your health matters to us as a state, and we're going to make sure you get it.
And the sad thing is that I think my understanding is that a lot of insurance companies are not on board with this. I'm still hearing about insurance companies who are denying reproductive care and denying gender affirming care. I mean, well, only certain kinds of gender affirming care, right? Like,
Mhm.
white men still can get their little blue pills, which is a form of gender affirming care, right? But it's just outrageous that other forms of gender affirming care are being denied to people. I know that it's still an issue, even though it is a law. I am hearing very consistently again and again that insurance companies are a big problem when it comes to this law. And I don't know what's being done to address that, but I know that it's an issue.
And the other thing this law does, and to be in full disclosure, I have not had a case that is implicated or involves around this issue. But I know that the law does create a private right of action. So somebody who is denied those opportunities, it gives them a private right of action, meaning they can bring a claim, they can bring a lawsuit. And I think it will be interesting in the months and years to come to see how that private right of action is exercised against private companies. Right.
Right.
So the statute clearly prevents a public body from discriminating against people for seeking reproductive or gender affirming care. But it'll be interesting to see if people are able to use that private right of action to hold a private entity accountable, how that unfolds, and what maybe the law needs to change as to meet that response.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tied to this one also, just quickly, we've got a shield law in New Mexico now, also from 2023. And this is response to that wave again in the states around us, where states, counties, law enforcement bodies are trying to hold people criminally accountable when they provide reproductive and gender affirming care somewhere else. And so New Mexico signed into law in 2023. We said, nope, Texas, you don't get to extradite anybody who provides this care in New Mexico to a Texan. Arizona, same thing. So we're protecting our providers here in New Mexico to make sure they feel safe offering that care and that they're not going to face penalties somewhere else.
Right. And that what I think a lot of people don't realize is that that was an issue with some of the healthcare compacts, right? There was this like frenzied rush to push through this proposed legislation regardless. And a lot of people I know were saying, wait, hold on. How do we make sure that the providers who come to New Mexico and provide care consistent with New Mexico law, how do we ensure that they're protected? And how do we make sure that those people don't, then thereafter go to another state and, end up being arrested and jailed or whatever. And a lot of lawyers raised that issue and the pushback was kind of like, oh, lawyers hate the compacts. And that's not true. I think a lot of lawyers are in favor of the compacts. They just wanted them to be done right and done correctly with thought rather than this like demand that they be pushed through regardless in of the form that they were in.
And I think on that point too, the extradition prohibition part of the Shield Law is important to that. So that if someone from Texas came to New Mexico for reproductive or gender affirming care, whoever gave them that care could not be extradited to Texas to face
So important.
any penalties.
So important.
That's huge. That
Yeah.
says you, provider, you get to provide the care you want to provide, which you've trained to do, which you want to help your patients. You get to do that safely and not fear
Yeah.
repercussions from abroad. And one other thing I wanted to change about is really actually a couple of rules, but in the LGBTQ community, pronouns and salutations are important because words matter.
Yeah.
And when we are talking about people helping to assert their agency in the world, walk through the world as their authentic self, pronouns and salutations matter. And one of the things in my experience working with people, trans people, for example, is there's a phrase called misgendering or dead naming. So heavy. And for those who don't know what those are, so when somebody transitions, oftentimes they will change their name. They're starting a new existence, walking in the world differently. And so dead naming is when the people around them refuse to use their new name. Misgendering is very similar. When somebody says, I am authentically asking you to use she, her pronouns, or he, his, or they, them pronouns, when people around them purposefully do not use the pronoun of choice. And why that matters is that's them, that person having agency, asserting their new life in this new way, walking through life authentically, and just saying to the people around them, please refer to me as Miss or she. And it goes so far with people because it doesn't take much effort. Really, it doesn't, it's not that hard. If somebody asks me to refer to them as she, her, to do it, it's no skin off
Right.
my back. It's very easy. Makes a huge impact for the person on the other side. Conversely, purposely dead naming or misgendering them is so harmful because it's clawing them back to their previous existence. And I think I want to give credit here. Our New Mexico Supreme Court in 2025 issued an order that I think emphasizes and underscores this importance for LGBTQ plus people. They entered an order that said in court proceedings, in court, judges, lawyers, people in that proceeding have to address witnesses and other parties in the lawsuit with their preferred pronouns and salutations.
You are the person that that told me about that. I can't believe I didn't know that before. I mean, it's still important. And my understanding is that if a person makes an honest mistake and says, "I'm sorry, let me try again," or whatever, and if they make a genuine effort, even if they make a mistake once in a while, it's not a big deal. But it's that the problem is when someone is very purposefully
Right.
misgendering a person and insisting that a person is he when very outwardly presenting as she and very much wants to be she and is she. It's the deliberate misgendering that I think is the problematic. What do you think?
I absolutely agree. And I know this from my own friends and my own experiences
Yeah.
volunteering in the LGBTQ plus community. I'm on the board of an LGBTQ plus organization. I've been involved with called Casa Q. I've been involved with Casa Q. I've been involved with EQNM, Equality New Mexico, which is a queer LGBTQIA rights organization. We all make mistakes. We all slip up
Yeah.
sometimes, right?
Yeah.
And also, let me just also say, because it's another great resource for people listening or watching, the Transgender Resource Center of New Mexico. If you are a business owner or a group and you would like to get some sensitivity training on issues that face the queer and trans communities, reach out to Transgender Resource Center. They have a great training. I've personally done it several times. When I was a law student, I had them come do it at the law school.
Mm.
I've gone through it voluntarily. I've gone through it as part of other trainings for other organizations. They do a wonderful job of explaining why this matters and how easy it is to fix your mistake. And I think when people
They
do
are a
it,
tremendous resource.
I slip up. I do my best. I slip
Yeah.
up. I say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Let me get it right."
Yeah.
I think what I've learned in my trainings is when people do mess up, the best way to do it is just apologize, correct, move on. But
Yeah.
don't make it a big show. Don't make it a big thing because then what you're doing is you're making it about you,
Right.
not about the person you're trying to respect. And so to be most respectful, quick correction, move on.
And people should want to get it right, right? Like I get misgendered all the time. I get the correspondence addressed to Mr. Felix Real, and I acknowledge that people assume a lawyer is a guy, and I know that I have an unusual and kind of an ethnic name, so I know people will get it wrong, but to me it just says that that person is a little self-centered, and that's the conclusion I reach. And very often people will sometimes I'll respond and they'll realize because I've got my pronouns as part of my email signature and they say, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "It's no big deal. It happens 5 times a day probably."
Right. You also brought up the other point to this. There are innocent mistakes that
Yeah.
happen,
Yeah.
and there are people who do it purposefully to harm. And
Yeah.
that's the distinction. And that I think is kind of, what that order from the Supreme Court, the spirit of that is, hey, we want people to try, but we're not going to let you do it intentionally to cause harm.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, I think
that's
that's
that's that's a
important.
great thing to have about where our
Yeah.
judiciary's at.
Are there other laws or we're just working on enforcing those ones?
Well, I think that we got to enforce those, and
Yeah.
we've got lots of lawyers in the state who help do that. And
Yeah.
um,
Good.
certainly there are more places for improvement. We recently, there's a recent adoption law or a change to adoption law that came through, so that would impact LGBTQ plus folks. I think there's a lot of work being done in kind of in the CYFD and child custody area that can impact LGBTQ people as well. So there's lots more to be done, and I have confidence that the people of New Mexico and our legislators and our community are going to get it right and keep making those changes as we identify the needs and find a way to move forward with the solution.
Yeah. I mean, as you were talking, I was surprised that so many of those law changes are actually quite recent. And, they were supported by broad community support. So that shows that, a bunch of people in the community were already, kind of there in terms of policy. But in terms of what we have to enforce, I think we still have some improvements to make in our in
Certainly, there are improvements to make, but I think you also just raised a really important point. And I think as a member of the LGBTQ plus community and a lawyer in that community as well, we don't fight for rights and protections in a vacuum.
Mm,
All marginalized folks are impacted when one group when a right's taken away from one group, when one group is attacked. And so I think, it's really important that the BIPOC community, the queer community, the women's rights community, we all need to work and do work together. And as you were saying, a lot of these changes had broad community support. We're all lifting each other up when we
Yeah.
do that. And I think
Yeah.
it's really important to continue that collaborative effort because, when one group is attacked, all minority and or marginalized people are at risk.
That's
And
right. And
and we,
once you
we
start making exceptions, for example, under the Human Rights Act, if you say, well, it's meant to apply to, brown people, but not necessarily to gay people, then the entire body of law starts to erode for all marginalized people.
yeah, exactly. And so
You're right. It's so important for us to link arms and, be in community and and because when any one person is vulnerable, everyone can be vulnerable.
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that the old adage, they came for one group and nobody said anything. They came for another, they came for another, and then they came for me and there was no one there to speak up. We are collectively powerful. We are collectively strong, and we have to maintain that arm, as you said, linking arms together because that's how we make change and that's how we protect everybody.
Right, right. Chris, I'm so grateful that you were willing to talk to me today. I think I mentioned to you I had a conversation with someone in the community who just expressed that they were feeling really vulnerable right now and especially vulnerable about being out. And I just thought, oh my gosh, we still have a ways to go in terms of making people feel safe or helping people to feel safe being their authentic selves and expressing love the way they want to express love and expressing their personality and the way they want to. And so I realize, I mean, that goes back to the original question, which is why do we need Pride Month? Because we want people to feel proud of who they love. We want people to feel proud of however they want to, look or whatever. And I think we have more to do.
We do have more to do, but we've got to really, when I was thinking about this and how I would kind of frame my view of the laws that protect LGBTQ folks in New Mexico, we have a amazing, strong foundation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of each of these laws as a brick in that
Yeah.
fortress of rights. We have a great foundation and we've built up some of those bricks, but the foundation's strong. And with a
Yeah.
strong foundation, you can expand a lot.
I love that. Chris, is there any other kind of substantive question that you wanted to talk about before I get to the travelogue portion of the interview?
Well, I just want to bring up one brief point. I'm an out gay man, and I think we hear in different communities, representation matters.
Yeah.
And so, I try to live as an out proud lawyer. I'm part of the LGBTQ Bar Association. I try to make sure people I know that I'm a gay lawyer, or that I'm a lawyer that happens to be gay, or I'm a gay man that happens to be a lawyer, however you want to view it. Because representation matters. It's important that people see themselves in positions of power. And as I said earlier, I believe, as lawyers, we have a great deal of power. I think we have a great duty that comes with that power, but we do have a great deal of power, but so do our elected folks. And,
Hmm.
I think we need more representation in our elected body. I was just thinking about this yesterday. I am aware of 4 out judges in the state, in our
Yeah.
entire state. 4 on the
And
bench.
there are a lot of judges, so that's
We
a
have a
very
lot of
small
judges.
percentage.
Only 4 out queer judicial officers in the state. A handful, not even a handful anymore, even fewer. Well, now I don't want to get in too much trouble, but out legislators in the
Mm,
roundhouse. We need
yeah.
more. We need more on our city councils because representation matters. And when you have somebody who looks like you, walks like you, lives like you in a position of power, that's how you make change.
Yeah.
We need more of it.
And thank you also, because I think you are an inspiration to all kinds of people. And I'm grateful that you feel comfortable being out and you can lend some courage to other people to also live authentically.
Well, thank you for that. I just wanted to say, I was growing up, my parents instilled in me this idea that no matter what we have or don't have, be that power or money, you can always help someone.
Yeah,
And
so
and
true.
I that has infused a lot of what I've done in life, including why I'm a plaintiff's lawyer. You know, I get to help somebody right or wrong. I get to help the queer community in the ways that I can with whatever skills I might have, or just showing up at something, or being on a board, and I think that want to help, that desire to help, that need to help is so prevalent in our plaintiffs lawyers. And I think oftentimes people don't recognize that we really are there to help, and that we feel good when we do it. And that's
Yeah.
why we do it. And so that's also why I stand as a proud gay man lawyer. Um,
I love you so much, my friend. I'm so proud that you are my friend.
well, thanks for
uh,
having me today. I
Yeah,
appreciate
okay,
it.
now the fun question. What is your favorite New Mexico meal and or day trip?
Okay, my favorite meal, I'm not going to name a restaurant 'cause I
Okay.
think that's fair, but when I'm feeling indulgent, some chicharron, and there's two kinds, right? There's the crispy kind, and there's the kind, the more blandita, the softer. Both have a wonderful place in this world, and some days I want one, and some days I want the other. So when I'm indulging, some chicharron. My personal favorite day trip. It's not that far, but I love going up to Jemez Falls.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
And, I think it's a nice drive to get up there, up through past Battleship and up around, and going up past La Cueva. And then you get to go for a really reasonable hike to some great waterfalls. So,
Oh, yeah. Any place in New Mexico that has water
yeah, that's fair.
is
So I think,
refreshing to me.
so to put the two together, my favorite day would be a day trip to Jemez Falls with a picnic basket full of chicharron.
Oh my God. I want to do that. Let's go tomorrow.
Sounds good.
Chris, thank you so much. And I really look forward to talking to you again and hearing more about your work.
Well, thank you. And I really appreciate the work you do with this podcast. And it's important, and I'm glad we have this outlet. So thank
Thanks,
you.
Chris. Talk
Have a
to you
good day.
later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Before we wrap up, we want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by the New Mexico Trial Lawyers Association Alliance for Justice. We want to thank our Chili Circle supporters, the Tracy Law Firm, and Curtis and Company. Through their generous investments, they're safeguarding New Mexicans' right to access justice and a jury.
Thanks for joining us on New Mexico Legal Lowdown. If today's conversation changed how you see the legal system, share it with a friend. We'll be back next time with another trial lawyer fighting for New Mexicans. Produced and powered by LawPod.